From wherever you are in the world. My name is Vicky Sins and I'm from the World Benchmarking Alliance, where I lead our climate work. We're here to talk about assessing companies' transition plans and the harmonizations efforts that have been ongoing in the recent past. So over the recent days here at COP on the ground, we have heard a lot about how we move from commitment to implementation. And with the shift from setting norms around GHG emission reduction targets to the urgent needs from implementing strategies on how actually to achieve them, we see that in the last years, transition plans have become a norm to really drive action on the private sector. These transition plans are considered to be vital for managing climate-related risks, but also to strengthen what we want to refer to as driving accountability on what the role of the private sector is in actually to achieve these 1.5 degrees goals. Transition plans have even become mandatory in certain parts of the world, when we see in Europe that doesn't only require companies to just disclose on their targets and their emissions, but also how are you going to implement them through a due diligence process. We also see that there's been huge effort made by standard setters, different coalitions, initiatives, and also regulators to really define what transition planning content means in the disclosure frameworks, but also on guidance on standard settings and looking for how are they interoperable across the different disclosure exercises. We believe that a well-defined transition plan can actually truly serve as a roadmap for companies, not only to manage and monitor, but also to truly accelerate the shift towards how to navigate into a net zero future. These should also look at how to include just transition and nature-related principles. By also strengthening collaboration with different countries, companies can support and elevate actually the implementation of the so-called national climate commitments, as well as the long-term low-emission development strategies, or the LT-LEDs. To make these plans consequential, standardized approaches are needed to truly assess the credibility of these plans and their effectiveness. To address this, the so-called Assessing Transition Plan Collective, the ATP call, was an ad hoc working group that came together that was co-chaired by the World Benchmarking Alliance, as well as the Columbia Center on Sustainable Investment, the CCSI. This was created in 2023 and worked out through 2024. And in the end, at the end of September, the ATP collective guidance was published, and this was a framework on truly showing what does harmonization across assessing transition plans look like. It offers a comprehensive guidance to assessors that are in the space of assessing transition plans of corporates. This framework looks at how do we harmonize approaches for evaluating the corporate transition plans, and it lays out a groundwork for ambitious future standards and practices that will define the credibility and the impact of corporate climate plans. So I will go a little bit into saying what it actually means and how transition plans could be established as a new norm. And then I will also look at on the right, I have Mr. Giulio Berruti. He's the climate director at BSR. He will provide some additional perspectives on the connection of these transition plans with also just transition and nature. And then I'm very pleased that we have Johan Falk. He's the CEO and co-founder of Exponential Roadmap, and he will also look at the reinforcement of the importance of transition plans and why are they needed for transformative change. So at the end, we will also have some time for questions. So if you have any questions, please feel free to save them to the end. So as we've seen also here on the ground and in the recent year, there have been guidance from the UN Secretary General with the high-level expert group on integrity matters, but also the Race to Zero, the GFANZ, the TCFD, etc., on really seeing how do we push companies to develop and implement the reporting on transition plans. The good news is that all these frameworks and standards are well defined, they're quite consensual, and most of these disclosure frameworks are interoperable, despite of some pretend the opposite. As I said, the transition plan of a corporate should not just be seen as a reporting exercise, because it's really a true tool to steer your companies towards a net zero world. So And Johan will also go into more details of what that actually could mean. But we all know that the window of actually achieving a 1.5 degrees is closing. But we want to, of course, see that the transition plan is aligning with this 1.5 degree goal. And then also that they should include a sectoral and regional approach and really look at the implementation efforts on the ground. Beyond the companies themselves, these transition plans can also suit different purposes. They can inform market regulators, central banks, shareholders of these companies, but also it can really inform the right policy levers that are needed in order to move to implementation of the transition plans, but it can also inform the investment plans that are needed in order to truly accelerate on technology development and the implementation of these transition plans. So also, this transition plan can be seen as a tool to reinforce the dialogue between the so-called national determined contributions or the national ambition of a country, and then how the company's transition challenges are done to foster actually the transition of the country, what policies are needed to support the execution and implementation of the NDCs, and what technology needs to be further invested in. The last few days talks about the whole of economy approach, so that also refers to a whole of society approach, to truly look into what skills need to be developed, what does the future workforce look like for our country, and really translate into and what's then the role of the private sector in order to help implementing these plans. So if we want the credible transition plans to be delivered and avoid confusion or sometimes even arbitration between stakeholders, there was a need to truly harmonize these assessment practices in the way that also disclosure practices have been harmonized in the recent years. So during this 1 year, the WBA and CCSI, so the Columbia Center for Sustainable Investment, they've convened this international working group, which was called the ATP Call. It brought together 90 individual experts and more than 40 organizations, including the organizations PSR and Exponential Roadmap, and really developed this guidance as a first international effort to propose a harmonization of assessment practices. It shows how you move from this disclosure exercise and truly proposes an assessment process along 4 steps. I encourage you all to go to the website, and it's all publicly available, and it's all available for everyone to use. But in short, a credible transition plan should be aligned with international decarbonization goals, i.e. the goals of the Paris Agreement. It needs to be consistent with sectoral and local transition plans, so the context in which a company is operating, but then also it needs to be feasible to be implemented in terms of the timeline and also the technology that is available. So, as I already briefly introduced, I'm here together with our good friend and relation, Giulio Berruti. He's the Director of Climate within BSR, and he will now elaborate a little bit further on what we've already covered so far. So, Giulio, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Vicky, and it's a pleasure being with you all today. Just quickly, for those of you who don't know BSR, we are a non-profit business network and consultancy working with business to create a just and sustainable world. We've been working on climate transition plan for quite some time, and I cannot agree more, Vicky, with the words and the framing that you put forward in there. The first point in terms of maybe reinforcing the messages is there's a lot of work that's been going on from companies in the past 2 years in moving from targets to disclosing climate transition plans. But as Vicky said, we know that disclosure is one part of the picture. Climate transition plan need to be the guiding strategy for getting companies to where they need to be and to support the efforts that countries are putting forward with their NDCs. So that use of CTPs as a strategy tool, I cannot reinforce it more. One area that I wanted to elaborate a bit more on before getting into the just transition point is on the business transformation angle. So business model transformation is, in our view, a key part of what a climate transition plan should be about. When you take the guidance that exists out there, it's very clear that business model and the products and services portfolio that companies put forward are a critical component of the implementation strategy and the foundation of the CTP. And we feel that sometimes this point is overlooked because we have a tendency of taking sometimes incremental steps, but what we really need to look at is the wider picture, where we need to be in the future, and then backcasting from there and getting to the changes in potential changes depending on the sector, on what we need to do as a company itself. The other point that I really wanted to stress is on just transition. As Vicky said, we feel strongly at BSR that climate transition plan not only should be linked to the business strategy itself, but they should be the vehicle through which companies embed just transition and nature-related considerations into how they approach their sustainability journey. And this is because climate, nature, and people are deeply interconnected, of course, and this connection must be respected. It is very clear that even us in the climate community, we have been working on climate mostly, but it's important that at this stage we really get the climate, human rights, and nature agenda together, and that we do so. We believe that climate transition plan could be a vehicle to do that. It does not substitute the overall human rights strategy of the company or the nature strategy of the company, but highlighting the interconnection of your climate journey with the people element and the nature element is a critical component, and it would be a miss of an opportunity not to do so for companies. This is because workers and communities are vulnerable to ongoing climate change impacts and can also be vulnerable to activities that we undertake in the transition. So as an example, to make it concrete, we all know that we need to move to more circular business models, but we also know that moving to circularity might have some job and just transition implication. We need to consider that, and what do we do systemically to achieve and to address those. One pragmatic way to look at that nexus is to start by thinking through mapping what the implications between climate, social, and nature are in building a climate transition plan as a company, and thinking about what set of metrics beyond climate mitigation we can leverage in how we put forward our strategy, and that can touch on climate justice, just transition, and nature element.
We have a little problem with that microphone.
Okay.
Can you just use that? Turned on?
Okay, does that work? Great. No, so as I was saying, I think I'll wrap it up right now, but the point that I was making at the end is really one way to make it operational is really to start and looking at what metrics are and what the interconnection is in terms of the people and the nature implication in the way you approach your climate strategy, and think about the trade-offs that have to be present in there, and work towards minimizing them. I think with that, I'll pass it over to you.
Thank you very much.
Should I start over again? Okay, thank you. So I'm Johan Falk. I'm heading up. I'm the co-founder of the Exponential Roadmap Initiative. We bring together what we call the leading transformative and disruptive companies taking action to halve emissions by 2030 through exponential climate action and solutions. As stated here, transition plans is becoming business as usual. That is absolutely crucial. And while the economy, 90% of the economy have set out net zero targets, it will be essential for every company to have a transition plan, really to explain how you both can be resilient in the new world while we're transforming, but actually how you will be able to create business which can grow over time. So that's my first sort of statement, why this is becoming so absolutely essential, because it's coming both from regulation. But there are two approaches to transition plans. Either you can see it as a tick in the box, it's something that you have to do, and some companies will do that. Or you can see it as a strategic tool, basically to develop your business. And to be successful as a business, you have to integrate your transition plans, that's as far as we see it, in your business strategy. So that's completely different to how climate and nature has been handled within most companies so far. I would say as a side function, as a CSR function. Now it will be integrated in everything. The CFO have to drive the transition plans. It will be integrated in business development, strategy development, product development, procurement. So that will be a revolution as far as we see it. Now, when we look at transition plans, what we expect from companies, basically, apart from what we talked about, is, of course, that companies have targets to cut emissions in line with science, which is about halving emissions at least every decade. Not only their own emissions, but also the value chain emissions, which is, of course, a tremendous challenge. You're talking about your suppliers, you're talking about your customers downstream. So it's not sufficient just to look as a company how you achieve net zero. You can't do that on your own. You have to do it together with your suppliers and customers. So either you win or fail together. The leading companies realize that as we speak. And I would say that with our companies, we represent a little bit more than 1% of the economy. All are implementing transition plans and are doing that particular work. But apart from the down curves, when we talk about cutting emissions, it's also about transforming your complete portfolio and potentially your business model, as we talked about, to be able to actually scale up what we call climate solutions, the up curves as well. Because this is basically the only way for companies to be able to prove that they can grow over time, which is, of course, the key motivator for companies. And apart from that, what we call contributing to climate action in society, the fourth pillar, actually influencing policies which could enable the transformation. And now to wrap up, I would like to state that companies are really going in the front line in terms of transition plans. The key will now be to link that to national, subnational, and city transition plans. We have a lot of focus on NDCs, the target setting. That's absolutely essential, but the key point will be that countries, nations, and cities will also have transition plans or action plans, which will be broken down to the different key sectors and areas such as energy, transportation, mobility, regenerative agriculture. And the winning plans, as far as we see it, will focus on how you actually develop these solutions and how you scale up these solutions and connect it with the company's transition plans. So we really foresee that it will be a positive competitive race between both companies' value chains as well as nations of actually accelerating and scaling up the next generation solutions which are aligned with the net zero vision. Thank you.
Thank you, Johan. I'm looking in the audience. Are there any questions? Sorry, we have an issue with the mic. But are there any questions in the audience at this moment in time? No questions? Okay, then I wanted to just say, you know, this publication that we've done on the ATP collective. So how do we harmonize the assessment of actually the integrity and the credibility of transition plans can be truly used as a tool to steer the need for development of these credibility of transition plans. And to Johan's point, these can be really used to underpin the resilience of this new economy. Can be considered as a strategic tool for countries and companies on the implementation of new ambition efforts that will be set throughout the coming days and months, hopefully when we see new NDCs and ambitious NDCs coming up. They can be translated into becoming a true mapping tool for this whole of society approach, where we not only take into the change to a low carbon economy, but have a true vision of how we integrate nature and the social implications, to Julio's point, into these plans and into the execution, into what is going to be the new low carbon future that is going to be resilient for the people that are operating in it. With that, I want to thank my fellow speakers, I want to thank the audience, and I wish you all a great day. Thank you.